what do you feel is really has changed in a just a violinistic and technical approach over the years with all the experience you've done, playing different concertos and performing? Is your routine, because I know from my experience, we spend many, many years preparing, and then the actual moment when you go on stage, it's the moment when we start learning. It can be any stage. It can be, stage in a different room. It's just
Yes,
a public performance. It doesn't mean it has to be big stage, Carnegie Hall. It can be anywhere.
absolutely.
So, and there's certainly this kind of advantage we have with some experience in a different situation, going on stage, learning something very different than you can learn in the practice room. Of course, that preparation is essential. But then the moment you learning something about yourself, what you can trust, you can experiment, you can go on the spot. I know most of the time I've seen you and some of your recordings, it feels like you are really having a wonderful time. So it doesn't happen by itself. It's a lot of preparation. You do lots of work. And then eventually on the stage, I think you mentally also prepare yourself that this is going to be something unique and special, and you're going to have the best time of your life performing for the audience, live audience, at that moment. So it really projects through you playing. So maybe you can share something about the mental preparation going, even when you feel that you're ready. What are the stages you take in order to prepare and in order to have this great meaningful experience on the stage? Because I think many students still need to learn this, because they preparing, they're doing their best, and then they somehow feel uncomfortable on the stage and they cannot focus, they cannot concentrate. What would be your advice?
Well, it's a multi-layered question, and it's extraordinarily important. Uh, there are two sides to preparation for anything, and one is physical, learning the piece, knowing the piece, living with the piece. But then there is the moment of performance, and there are, of course, factors that come into play which we very often cannot predict. Mental preparation, of course, is very important, but it has few different sides. One is of course it's easy for me sitting here in my house to say this, to agree with yourself that you will never feel completely prepared, no matter how much you practice. You There is always something to do. There is always something to improve. It's absolutely endless, and this in itself, I've seen it on myself, and I've seen it on my younger colleagues, is an enormous source of frustration. Uh, this should not be source of frustration. It should be a source of inspiration. Um, when you know that next time you can do it better, that I think in itself is a fantastic thought. Um, we can prepare mentally in many ways. One of them is somehow convincing yourself that you are not important. I found on myself, it's a psychological problem, and for me personally, I discovered it to be a source of what we call stage fright. And it is basically, and this is going back to the question that you asked, that we sometimes feel uncomfortable on stage and self-conscious, etc. Uh, the source is that we think first and foremost, and it's not natural for human being, we think of ourselves. We think, "Oh, do they like me?" That's the basic question. They being the audience. And it is very difficult not to think it. You are standing in front of either a dozen or a few thousand people. It really doesn't matter. Uh, to realize that essentially at the core of this lays the composer and the piece of art that we are fortunate to present to people, in a way to shift the limelight from yourself to Mr. Bach. And if if we should be worried about anything, is will they like Bach or will they like Brahms? I found it really a cornerstone to make myself more at home on stage, because I realized it's not about me. But again,
Great.
this is not something that we can decide and tomorrow morning wake up and have it in our pocket. It's a long process, but it is certainly achievable.
It's a great advice. Wonderful advice. It's more on the psychological side, right? More on the
Absolutely.
I'm just curious. I'm sure you have something more specific how you focus on the music in some of the ways. It's not only one way. I think it's multidimensional.
Of course.
Maybe you can share something. I mean, what comes to your mind? Because I'm sure there's something which bonds you. Sometimes maybe you don't feel, you have a jet lag. I mean, you don't feel very well. You still have to, disregard everything, and before the stage, you really have to focus on something to be able to bring the best out of Bach, Brahms, and Tchaikovsky. You have your little secrets.
Not really, but I will quote the same person twice. I will quote Rostropovich, a great cellist, one of the greatest ever lived, an enormous musician, a personality who influenced the history of music itself. Um, I asked him once about what does he think when he goes on stage, and his answer was nothing. Nothing. I try to think about nothing to make sure that I have no stupid thoughts in my head. And I can attest to that. The absolutely best, if I can recall concepts that I thought went well, my inner being on stage at these moments is when I have nothing going through my head but the next bar, but the next page, but what is coming in music. Of course, when it is a chamber music situation, you are in constant contact with your partners or with orchestra. There is constant dialogue, musical dialogue. But if there is nothing else in your mind, this is really extremely helpful to me. And about just physical reality of touring, well, I think I cured myself of jet lag only thanks to pandemic and being at home for half a year. In a month or so, I felt after a month of isolation and staying home, I felt that I'm sleeping through the night like a normal person, so to speak. So I'm always, when touring, always in some kind of jet lag. So you're never in perfect physical shape, basically. But again, quoting Rostropovich, his famous phrase, "We're soldiers for music." And I think that in itself is an inspiration.